My name is Tom, I'm 48 years old, and I've been a truck driver since I was 22. I've driven through almost the entire country, crossing deserts, mountains, forests, and traveling roads that seem endless. The road can be lonely at times, but that has never bothered me. I've always enjoyed the sense of freedom and the quiet of nighttime drives, at least until what happened about a year ago on a highway in Kansas. Since that night, I've never picked up a hitchhiker again. I was hauling a load of agricultural supplies from Topeka to a small town in Colorado. It was a route I'd driven a few times before, and I knew I wouldn't see much traffic that night. The highway was practically straight, surrounded by empty fields, and the only sounds accompanying me were the steady hum of the engine and the faint crackle of the AM radio. It was around 3 a.m. when I saw someone on the side of the road. The man was waving frantically, trying to get my attention. He looked desperate, the kind of desperation that's hard to ignore. My first instinct was to keep driving. I'd heard plenty of stories about truckers getting robbed or tricked by hitchhikers, but something about the man's expression made me hesitate. He was dressed simply, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans dusty from the road, and he looked exhausted. I decided to stop. I pulled the truck over a little ahead of him and got out to hear what he had to say. The man looked relieved, as if I were his only hope. He told me his car had broken down earlier and that he needed to get to the next town, which was about 20 miles away. Despite a knot forming in my stomach, I told him to hop in. At first, he seemed normal. He thanked me repeatedly, saying he'd been waiting for hours and that no one else had stopped. I asked him the usual questions: where he was from, where he was headed. He answered, but his responses were always vague. Something about visiting relatives. So far, so good. But after a while, things started to change. He began asking strange questions. First, he asked if I believed in fate. I thought he was just trying to make conversation, so I told him I hadn't really thought about it much. But he pressed on. He asked if I'd ever felt like I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, the kind of question that sends a chill down your spine, especially when you're alone on the road with a stranger. I tried to change the subject, but he seemed to enjoy my discomfort. He started to laugh, a low, almost mocking laugh, like he knew something I didn't. Then he began talking about me. He knew things he couldn't possibly know. He knew my wife's name, that she lived in Omaha. He knew I'd sold my old truck a few months ago and even mentioned the license plate number. My heart started racing, and I asked him, my voice trembling, how he knew these things. He just smiled and said, "I know you, Tom, better than you think." That's when I saw something in the rearview mirror. A car. It hadn't been there before, but now it was following close behind me. The man noticed my reaction and said calmly, "You should pay more attention to what's on the road." My mind was racing. What was happening? Who was this man? I decided I needed to get rid of him, but I didn't want to be obvious about it. I told him I needed to stop at a rest area, and he just nodded, as if he already knew what I was going to do. When I finally pulled into a small, almost deserted rest area, I parked and told him I couldn't take him any further. He didn't argue. He got out of the truck calmly, but before closing the door, he looked at me with that same unsettling smile and said, "We'll see each other again very soon." I watched as he walked away, but when I glanced in the rearview mirror again, I saw the car that had been following me parked on the other side of the lot. It looked empty, but I didn't want to stick around to find out. I started the truck and got back on the highway. My eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, and sure enough, the car appeared behind me again, following closely. A few minutes later, it sped up and overtook the truck, only to slam on its brakes right in front of me. I had to hit the brakes hard to avoid a collision. I came to a complete stop and the truck fell silent. I stared at the car, waiting for someone to get out, but the doors stayed closed. That's when I looked to the side of the road and saw the man I'd left behind. He was just standing there watching me, with that same eerie smile. I didn't think twice. I shifted gears, swerved around the stopped car, and sped off as fast as I could. I only looked back once, and by then both the car and the man were gone. When I reached my destination, I tried convincing myself it had all been a coincidence. But the next morning, as I was inspecting the truck, I found something that still keeps me up at night. A handprint on the cabin door made of something black like soot. Since then, I've never picked up another hitchhiker. Because now I know, not everyone who asks for help on the road is what they seem to be. I've been a truck driver for almost 15 years. My name is Mark, I'm 41 years old, and I've crisscrossed the entire country, driving long distances to deliver cargo. In these 2 decades on the road, I've seen things that could make anyone's hair stand on end. Everything from drunk drivers attempting dangerous overtakes to animals crossing highways in the middle of the night. But none of that compares to what happened to me one early morning on a deserted highway in New Mexico. It was early December, and I had a load to deliver in Phoenix, Arizona. I hit the road late in the afternoon, knowing I'd have to drive through most of the night to meet my deadline. The route was straightforward but lonely. Highway 285 cuts through the desert in an almost straight line, with little traffic and vast landscapes of sand and cacti illuminated by the moonlight. Around 10 p.m., I began to notice something strange. A small car, it looked like an old sedan, appeared in my rearview mirror. That alone wasn't unusual. What caught my attention was the driver's behavior. They didn't try to pass me, nor did they maintain a safe distance. The car just stayed there, at a constant distance, as if watching me. At first, I ignored it. People drive weirdly all the time, I thought. But as the hours passed, the car remained behind me, its low beams fixed in my mirrors. I decided to test if it was just a coincidence. I sped up the truck and they did the same. I slowed down, and the car reduced speed too. I switched lanes multiple times, but they never left their position. That started messing with my head. I turned on the radio to distract myself, but the unsettling feeling of being followed wouldn't go away. When I saw the lights of a small gas station on the horizon, I decided to pull over, not because I needed fuel, but because I wanted to confront the driver and figure out what their problem was. I parked the truck by one of the pumps and waited, but the car didn't pull into the station. It stopped on the side of the road, a little farther ahead, with its headlights off. At that point, I was certain something was wrong. I got out of the truck and went into the convenience store to grab a coffee and figure out what to do. The clerk, an elderly man with white hair, gave me a suspicious look as I poured my drink. I decided to strike up a conversation. "Hey, did you see that car out there? It's been following me for a while now." He glanced out the window and frowned. I didn't see anyone pull up, but roads like this have stories. "What kind of stories?" I asked, trying not to sound nervous. He hesitated for a moment before replying, "Some drivers say strange things happen out here. People disappear. But it's probably just talk, right?" He chuckled nervously and quickly changed the subject. I went back to the truck feeling even more uneasy. The car was still there, parked like a shadow in the dark. I decided I wasn't sticking around to find out who was inside. I started the engine and got back on the road. For a few minutes, everything seemed normal, until the car's headlights appeared in my rearview mirror again. It was back. Now things started getting truly terrifying. The car sped up and began to close in on me. My heart raced as I tried to focus on driving. The car's headlights flashed erratically, as if the driver was trying to signal me. But it didn't feel like a cry for help. It felt like a threat. Suddenly, I heard a loud noise from the back of the truck. It sounded like someone had thrown something at the trailer. I quickly glanced in the mirrors but saw nothing except the car, now almost tailgating me. My mind started racing. What if there was more than one person? What if someone had climbed onto the truck while I was at the gas station? I tried to stay calm, but then another sound came, metal screeching, like giant nails scraping against the side of the truck. I grabbed the CB radio and called out to any truckers in the area, but all I got in return was static. The situation hit its peak when the car started to pass me. It pulled up alongside my cab, but instead of overtaking, it stayed right there. I looked out the window expecting to see the driver's face, but the inside of the car was completely dark. I couldn't see anyone. Then, in an instant, the car's headlights flashed brightly, almost blinding me. And just as suddenly, it sped up and disappeared down the highway, leaving only the echo of its engine in the empty night. For a moment, I thought it was over. But as I rounded the next bend, My heart nearly stopped. The car was there, parked in the middle of the road with its doors wide open. I slowed down, trying to decide what to do. My instincts screamed at me not to stop, but my curiosity pulled me in the opposite direction. When I was about 30 yards away, I saw something that still gives me chills to this day. A tall, thin figure, cloaked in black, stepped out of the car and stood in the middle of the road, staring directly at the truck. I wasn't going to wait to find out what it was. I slammed my foot on the accelerator and swerved around the stopped car, nearly running off the road. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, the figure was gone. I don't know what happened that night. All I know is that when I finally reached Phoenix, I sat in the parking lot for almost an hour, trying to process what I'd just experienced. Since then, I've avoided driving on Highway 285 at night. There's something out there on that road that can't be explained, and I never want to see it again. My name is Jake, and I've been a truck driver for over 20 years. I've always enjoyed the solitude of the road, the silence and the sense of freedom as I drive through vast, open landscapes. But since what happened to me a few months ago, I've felt a heavy weight every time I'm alone at night. I don't know if anyone will believe me, but I'm going to tell my story the best I can. It was a cold October night, and I was hauling a load of agricultural machinery from Denver to Billings, Montana. My route took me through Wyoming, across a mostly deserted stretch of land where the sky seemed to go on forever. There wasn't much traffic, just the constant hum of my truck's engine and the empty road lit by my headlights. Everything was calm until around 2 a.m., when something strange caught my attention. In the sky to my right, I saw a bright light. I initially thought it was a plane, as commercial flight routes often cross that area. But this light was different. It was much larger than any airplane light I'd ever seen and seemed to change colors, white, then blue, and finally a vivid red. I tried to ignore it. Sometimes fatigue can play tricks on your eyes. I kept driving, but the light didn't go away. In fact, it seemed to be following me. It moved in the same direction I was going, keeping a consistent distance. After a few minutes, I started feeling an unshakable sense of discomfort. I grabbed my CB radio and called out to see if anyone else was on the road and could see what I was seeing, but all I got was silence. It felt like I was the only person for miles. Then the light did something that froze me in place. It stopped in the sky, hovering motionless for a few seconds, and then it shot down toward the ground at an incredible speed. It moved so fast, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It stopped about 100 meters above the road directly in front of me, and just hovered there. I was stunned. I slowed down, but didn't come to a complete stop. My gut told me I needed to get past it as quickly as possible. Just as I started to accelerate again, something even more terrifying happened. All the electronics in my truck shut off. The engine died, the headlights went out, and the CB radio went silent. Everything went completely dark, except for the bright light now hovering above me. I tried to restart the engine, but nothing happened. Looking out my window, I realized the light wasn't just some glowing orb. It was a solid object. It looked like a craft, circular in shape, with a spinning ring around it that emitted that intense glow. I was frozen, my hands gripping the wheel as I felt a strange vibration in the air. It wasn't exactly a sound, but more like a low-frequency hum that resonated deep in my chest. Then out of nowhere, a blue beam of light shot down from the craft and enveloped the truck. It was so bright that I could barely keep my eyes open. The entire cab was bathed in the glow, and I felt an intense heat, like I was standing under the midday sun. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I was completely immobilized, as if something was holding me in place. I don't know how long I stayed like that. It could have been seconds or minutes. Suddenly, the beam of light vanished and the craft began to ascend slowly. The hum faded as it rose higher into the sky, and then, just like that, it disappeared into the night. As soon as it was gone, all the systems in my truck came back to life. The engine roared to life, the headlights flickered on, and the CB crackled with static. It was as if nothing had happened. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Then, with my heart racing, I hit the gas and drove as fast as I could, putting as much distance as possible between me and that spot. When I finally reached Billings the next day, I noticed something strange. My truck's clock showed that I had lost about 2 hours and it didn't add up. I hadn't stopped for that long. I tried telling some of my fellow truckers what had happened, but they just laughed it off, saying I must have dozed off and dreamed the whole thing. Since that night, I can't help but look up at the sky every time I'm alone on the road. I don't know what I saw or what happened to me, but one thing is certain: I'll never be the same again.
Hello. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with your friends. This helps us grow and bring even more new content. Thank you, and see you next time.